Well, we want to welcome everybody to our webinar today on how to find the gold mine, or the gold that's hidden in your losses. My name is Mike Brozzi. I'm the Senior Global Account Manager here at Primary Intelligence, and one of our principals, been with us since the very beginning, actually our first employee, and have been dealing with many different clients over the past years, and really have found this topic to be something that I think is kind of more of my soapbox. As you can see, I've done a blog post on this as well recently, and really hope to share and enlighten a few of you on ways that you can leverage your losses to win more and really uncover the gold that's there. We also have with us Chris Daly, who's one of our program consultants and been with us nearly as long as me. Chris, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm a program consultant. My job is to help companies win more business. I've been with Primary Intelligence for about a dozen years, and I think that I think there's just so much value and so many different ways that we can make use of the intelligence in win-loss research.
Fantastic. Well, we look forward to sharing some of this, and we're just going to kind of jump right on in here. We'll slide on down to our whoa, too many slides. Our first slide here, and kind of to go over the agenda of some of the things we're going to cover. First, some of the things, we'll start off with talking a little bit about win-loss analysis and what it is and how you can actually leverage that. We'll do a few different poll questions around that so we can make sure that everybody's very familiar with when we say win-loss analysis, what we mean about that. But after we get through that, we're going to talk a little bit about really uncovering the reasons that you're losing. And I think that's pretty a common thing when you start looking at your losses. Let's figure out what we're doing wrong so that we don't have to continue to do the same things over and over and expect a different result. Which, Chris, what's the definition of that? That's the definition of insanity, right?
Something to that effect.
Yeah. Well, I see that happening all the time with many of my clients, and look forward to sharing how we can actually change that a little bit. And then Chris is going to talk a little bit more about what your competition's strengths and weaknesses are, and how through the minds of your losses you can find some of that out and really start to penetrate ways that you can improve and change as an organization. And then finally, we're going to end off with how you can turn those past losses into future wins. And we have some nice little anecdotes from a few of our different clients and also internally on ways to do that. And we're going to also open up the webinar today to display some of the tools that we have called TruVoice that helps you then leverage your wins and your losses, especially losses today, on how to turn them into very strong leads and ways to actually crush the competition with the marching orders you've been given from your actual losses. So let's actually head on down to the next slide here.
Perfect.
It's the poll question here. So
I will open that up in just a second. And while I do, I want to remind everybody, we want this webinar to serve you as well as possible. So I'm going to launch poll questions. That'll help direct us a little bit. You can go ahead and we'd love you to vote. We'll leave that open for just a minute. But while we do that, I also want to remind everyone that we do in the webinar tool have the ability for you to submit questions. Please do. If we're talking about something and it needs to be clarified, ask a question. There's also the ability to raise your hand, which is usually something maybe you do to get attention to be unmuted. We don't plan on taking verbal questions today, so let's use that question box as much as possible, please.
That way everybody actually can get a chance to get that information, because we are recording the session and we'll be able to provide it to anyone that's here or anyone that wasn't able to join. And we'd hope this gets pushed around throughout your organizations to really help the rest of your teams and your internal stakeholders, and or if you're a prospect on this call, to understand how to then use this to build the business case to be doing a strong win-loss program and really pulling that gold out of your losses.
We'll go ahead and just leave that poll question up for just another maybe 5 or 6 seconds. If you have a last vote, please toss it in there, and we'll close that down and take a look at our audience. And I'll close that down now, and it looks like we have a very win-loss heavy audience today, which is great.
Nice.
88% of the people using it, and a couple of people who are not sure.
Okay, well, I think this will be great, because the topic that we're discussing today will really be going back and not just talking about win-loss, but really peeling back the onion on that, the process on how to really get to those losses and understand how you can find the gold there.
So let's hop in.
All right, well, let's head on down to the next slide. So what is win-loss analysis at your organization? And Chris and I put this slide together to kind of help people start thinking about ways that you can do this. And we'll have another poll question after this, but I've seen different organizations when I asked this question over the last, what is it, almost 14 years now, where I say, hey, so what are you doing from a win-loss perspective? And they'll come in and say, well, we're talking to our sales reps and understanding why we're winning or losing there. Typically, the question I ask them is, so you're losing because the rep can't have any control over, but you're winning it because the rep rocks, right? And they laugh and giggle a little bit, and then they say, exactly. We need to get a little deeper than that. And it's been nice to be able to help those organizations really understand there's better ways to get it. Not that I think the debrief with sales reps is a bad thing. I think it's great to do because it gets you all thinking about still how can I improve and change and not continue to do the same things over and over. But the information typically we find isn't nearly as telling as you get it from your buyer. Also, analyzing your CRM data. We've also seen many different organizations using that. Chris, do you have any comments on how you've seen other organizations using that from a CRM perspective?
Yeah, I think that you get some information if the CRM is used properly and it's set up properly, and that's a whole different question altogether.
Totally.
But be able to,
used.
yeah, well, be able to say this is our win rate, these are the competitors we're seeing. Again, when you ask the sales rep for his reason for a win or a loss, it's often an economic decision or for a loss, or as you said, he's just good because he's a sales guy. But I think there is a level of analysis that needs to be done at the CRM level. Make sure you're recording and gathering the right information so that A, you can make decisions from that, and B, move into different, more valuable practices.
One other thing, as you're analyzing and you're setting up your CRM systems, one thing that I would highly suggest for those that are doing this, making sure to capture the contact information at the opportunity level. We use Salesforce.com and integrate with it as well in different ways. But by capturing that information at your CRM level and, at the contact level for the opportunity, you can really start to make a win-loss program sing. Without that data, it is very difficult to get the sample, as many of our clients have found out over the years. So by doing that, you'll really help your programs go forward. Let's talk a little bit about interviewing your channel partners. I mean, just like debriefing with your sales reps, many of our clients have used the chance to talk to their channel partners to say, so brokers or whatever that might be, and saying, how can you get into that? Also then, from what our perspective is, go to the buyer, talk to them, both your wins and your losses, and really find out that information. Chris, do you want to put up the next poll?
Happy to. And we'll launch that. And I think that these are all very valid ways to gather intelligence. Some of them we subscribe to a little bit more strongly than others, but I'd be interested in seeing what our audience does. The votes are coming in fast and furious. That's good. Don't want to leave the poll question up too long. Rather get into the meat of the webinar. So if people would just take a minute, reach over, click on a vote, that would be great. We'll go ahead and close that down in about 5 more seconds unless there's something you wanted to add, Mike.
No, I was just going to say we're planning to try to keep this webinar pretty short, get to the meat and potatoes quickly, and as you have questions or would like to get back with us afterwards, we'd be more than happy to chat about the conversation as well.
I'll close that in 3, 2, 1, and we've got quite the variety here, and I'll share that data back out, but people are doing quite a bit of quite interesting things with their win-loss. So conducting their intelligence internally, analysis of CRM, quite a group that are doing third-party, which is great.
Nice.
Let's go ahead and
look at that and saying you're going back to that judge, jury, and executioner there, and really getting that information that is extremely valuable. And that's, again, where we're at. Chris, did you want to say something there?
No, I thought that was it's great to have that variety. And again, if people have any questions, don't be afraid to type that into the question box. But let's hop into this topic here.
Yeah. So what we were going to do is kind of talk a little bit about why we choose to go down the path of getting to that end user, the buyer, and how to then get that information there. We definitely think it's important to get it both from the wins and the losses. From the win side, getting the detailed best practices of why you won or lost. And from the loss side, not only finding out why you lost, but getting that detailed competitive intelligence is saying, here's the best practices that your competitors are bringing to play. And I think that's going to be some of the things we're going to chat a little bit about today. What could have you done differently? What were they hoping for, both from your wins and your losses? And getting that, and really, by getting that kind of information, really takes you much deeper than you'd be able to get from your sales team. Your sales team only has limited visibility, and I know I've been there. I'm there all the time, and I can only see certain ways and things, very little competitive intelligence that I'm able to capture when I'm on doing a presentation. And so really enjoy our own win-loss program, because I'm able to figure out what could I be doing differently and what are my competitors trying to do. And as you'll see in some of the data here, you may understand there's different competitors you didn't even realize you had as you get into the data. Chris, any comments?
No, keep going.
All right. Well, we'll just kind of move on from here and get right down to the next slide and get into the information. So let's uncover what are the real reasons that you lose. And we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of things that have happened here at Primary Intelligence. And as you can see this picture here, it's kind of helping you understand that the gold that's in your losses really is not that deep. You don't have to dig super deep into your losses to find a lot of the nuggets that are there. Starting off with, we did our own win-loss analysis. We started this program back, what is about 13 years ago. And we started to figure out some of the reasons we were losing. We were growing as an organization and really starting to add bodies to it and bring on a lot of different clients. Very rarely were we ever losing accounts that came to scalability, because we had a team of interviewers that were going on out. We could actually go out and interview hundreds of interviews in a short period of time for many of our clients. Where we were starting to lose some deals, though, was around the mom and pop shops that could come in and say, you know what, it's all about the quality of interviewing. And they would really pitch their idea that they could go in because they were the individuals that were doing the interviews were their top-level executives. And they could get to the details and the meat and potatoes of what was happening in that interview. And we only needed to lose 3 or 4 times in that kind of situation to figure out that we needed to make a change. We needed to improve. And one of the other things that we found out as we were doing not only the quantitative or the qualitative feedback that we were getting from our clients were saying that quality of interview is important, we're also from a quantitative perspective, we're getting the feedback that one of the criteria that we were measuring was quality of interviewing. And we were finding out that that was a huge importance for many of our clients and our prospects. And some of those smaller engagements where we felt we shouldn't have lost, we were losing because of some of these smaller mom and pop shops were showing that capability that we didn't necessarily have at the time. We changed our business model even after 3 losses to be able to pinpoint, here's the things that we need to change. We adjusted and we made it to the point where we didn't have an interviewing team anymore. We had our program consultants who were our top-level executives out there on the phones making those actual interviews. They had a team that was actually setting them up for them now, so we still had that capability to scale. We were able to scale back our program consultants to work with fewer clients, but really dive deeper into those interviews. We don't lose anymore because of mom and pop shops beating us around that topic. It's been fantastic how we've been able to pinpoint really quickly where the gold is and how then to use that win-loss data, especially the loss data, to say, here's some of the things we need to change. Chris, do you have a comment?
Well, I'll tell you what, we've got a question from the group, and I think this is a great time to put it in. And that would be the idea of what kind of success rate do we find talking to losses? Would losses even talk to us or invest the time to talk to us?
That's a great question, one that I get quite consistently actually as I'm doing in the sales process. We find that we're typically going to get about a 30% response rate across the board. Our losses are going to be a little bit lower, but if it's set up correctly, meaning that you've notified the respondent in advance, you've got your sales team on board, and they've actually either notified that individual during the sales process or whatever to let them know that, hey, this will be taking place, we can get even a higher response rate than that. But typically for most organizations, we're going to see about a 30% response rate. Isn't that what you see, Chris, as you're running these programs?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, yeah, that, and sometimes maybe even a little bit higher. But the losses do talk to us. And I think that from my point of view, it's interesting that they've invested the time in trying to make a decision, and they know that our clients have invested the time in trying to sell. There's expense on our client's part, and I think they're interested to reciprocate, because they didn't
Yeah.
select our client. And I also think that there's always an interest in telling why they made the right decision.
Yeah, kind of the venue to share that. They don't feel like they're being sold at this point in time because we're a third-party vendor. We're coming on in and being able to do this from a pretty objective perspective. They do know that typically the client that we're working for, but it gives them the chance to really share what took place, what our client, may have fallen on, and or where they did great, and using that information down the road to be able to help them improve. And that's one of the main key things that we're bringing up as we're setting up those appointments as well. Is it's all about process improvement.
Another question.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Mike. Another question that came in was, how many loss interviews did you need before you identified the trend you were describing in your slide?
We actually had only about 3 or 4 losses in that scenario. Now, again, we had won quite a few deals, and in our space, we do have a pretty substantial win rate. But when we lose, it's very painful. And we go, why did we lose that engagement? And it really only took us about 3 or 4 losses to be able to say, we need to make a change here. We need to adjust, because not only do we find out that we're losing to some companies that we felt we never should have lost to because of our differentiators that we had, but we were losing them because of a key criteria that we were finding that is something that we need to really improve upon. And that business change made that happen pretty quickly.
I think that's a really good point. And something that I try to talk with my clients about is kind of this bigger picture. There is information in every one of your opportunities that can help somebody make a change. And you don't have to wait for 100, 200, 300 interviews before it becomes something strategic enough for your entire organization. If you can't learn something in 5 to 8 to 10 interviews, then we need to revise the questions we're asking. But I love these questions that we're getting from the audience. Thank you very much.
Also, I think it's important as you look at, as you build your win-loss program and you're actually adding more and more interviews to it, yes, there's some ways that you can do some slicing and dicing, but almost never are you going to be able to have enough data to be able to get, if you're looking from a quantitative perspective that you have to have a certain amount of interviews to be able to make a decision, you're always going to have holes. However, as you get into it, I've had many of different clients that you get in, you only have 3 or 4 interviews in a certain vertical, but they start to pinpoint, just like us here. The vertical we were looking at was our smaller engagements. We didn't have that many smaller engagements, but when they were coming up, we found out there were some issues there that we needed to make a change. Don't be afraid to look at that data and make decisions off of that and move forward as an organization. You're always going to make good, bad decisions throughout your organization. This gives you the information to be able to make those quicker around, especially those losses, and find those gold nuggets that are there.
Great. Perfect.
Any more questions, Chris?
No, our question queue is empty, which is invitation for people to hop in and ask if they'd like, but I'm ready to move on. Okay,
let's move on to the next slide here. Hopefully you've really seen that there's a lot to be had here. Chris, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you. This is your slide, so have some fun with
it. You bet. So what we want to do is we want to use our losses to uncover strengths and weaknesses, competitive strengths and weaknesses, because over time we're going to find that there are consistent reasons that we lose business. And remember, when you're talking about a win-loss project, you're talking about a case where you've done your demonstration, you've submitted your response to the RFP, you've been through and made the short list. Generally, that's the way the win-loss program works best. So they have a problem. They're down to what we call the last couple of vendors, either who could probably do a good job for them, and there's some reason, you on that mile race, you made it to the last 100 feet, but didn't get all the way to the finish line. So let's find out what those problems are. And we've got to be willing to be a little bit self-reflective. We've got to know where we're underperforming, and are there consistent differences in our performance between the wins and losses. And with infinite amount of time, infinite amount of money, infinite amount of resources, you can make changes to everything in your company. But since we don't live in that world, we have to know what's most important to the market so that we can focus our attention in those areas. And that's what we're going to look at. I'm going to take us through an exercise where we can identify that. And the data that we're looking come from the tools that we use to help our clients once we've collected data. Mike, there we go.
Yep.
So the most important thing is step one is we've got to measure performance. And as we start, we look at Primary Intelligence, we look at the buying decision in 3 different areas. We talk about the company, we talk the service or the solution, we talk about the sales team. Is this the right solution? Is really your prospect is trying to understand, is this the right solution for us? Is the sales team communicating it to us well enough and providing us with concern resolution and what have you? And is the company going to be a good fit for us down the road moving on? And so we need consistent measurement. We need to rank these things by importance, these criteria. And then we want to note our inconsistent performance area so we can prioritize actions. And exactly, as Mike's looking here, I've sorted the data in this slide in order of most important to least important. And this is stated important based on questions that we use in our interview guide. And what we have is a service provider. And the idea is that we want to make sure to, in this case, the things that are identified as most important are the client service team impression, business fit, personality fit. There are some things about industry experience, access to experts. But let's just look at those top 5 areas. The interesting thing to me here is that when you're winning, when this client is winning, they're scoring a 9. But when they're losing in client service team impression, they're scoring a 1.1 points lower. So there's a 10% difference in the perceived performance in those 2 scenarios. Mike, what did you want to add to that?
What I wanted to say is that this is actually, this data that's being pulled out of it is right from the analytics side of the tools. Many of our clients, this is a newer application that's just been launched, but you can get the same exact chart and table right from our tool, and it actually builds on itself as it goes forward. So it's great stuff to get into and be able to really get to this information really rapidly.
So if I were taking a look at the data, I look at my top 3 areas, the things that are most important, and I can see that I have at least a 1-point gap between my wins and losses, even up to a 1.5 point gap in that personality fit area. So I already know now in a very quick world what's important to my marketplace, and I can see that I have some inconsistencies in performance, and that what would happen if I could bring some of my lesser performers at making a good client service team impression or presenting a good business fit. What if I could create a program and a training exercise that would make everyone as consistent as the best performers? What would happen if I shrank that gap, Mike? I mean, logically, you're thinking, yeah, I'm going to win more business.
Mm-hmm. There's some gold.
Right there.
Let's get that gold mine rolling.
And not only do we have to look at it at the upper level, but if you go to the next slide, Mike.
Yep. Right.
We can, in fact, get down to specific competitors where we can filter the information and say, against this competitor, are those same areas most important? Do we still have the same level or the same size of gaps against specific competitors? And then we can take that same idea that we talked about before of identifying where we're most inconsistent and what matters most, and we can build competitor profiles and tactical plans. And now some will say, okay, great, I know that I'm stronger in my wins than I am in my losses in these areas. You've said and demonstrated that we can show that there are inconsistencies in the most important parts of our most important decision-making factors. But it's interesting to know where I need to do, but what I really don't understand is what I need to do. Well, it turns out that when you do your win-loss correctly, your market tells you what. They define the best practices because they're the ones making the decisions, right, Mike?
And it's crucially important, I think, as we go on in here, that you're not just looking for a quantitative perspective, that you're doing both the quantitative and the qualitative, so that you do have those best practices that are coming out, not just from you, what you did right when you won it, but when your competitors are winning it, and in the same criteria, what are they doing different than you are? And are there ways that you can apply those same best practices into your own sales process? And like Chris is talking about there, building that training mechanism by using your competitive information. And some of our clients are extremely good at this. Some aren't. And I think that's really ways that we can help them do that.
So let's slide to the next slide. We've seen that business fit and client service team impression are 2 very important things. So what happens when we take the quotes about client service team impression? What do we see as being the most important, either with our client or what the competitor was doing? These are, in our interviews, we call them trigger questions. When we have somebody rate our client and the competitor on, say, client service team impression on that 0 to 10 scale. They may rate our client as a 6. They may rate the other vendor as a 9. So as I'm going through and talking, I see that was very important. I asked the question, what was the difference between a 6 and a 9, and what did the competitor do that was more effective, and what did my client do that was less effective? So by definition, I'm defining that best practice. I'm getting to the meat of what in their mind is something that helps to make an improvement. You can even flip. These are just examples, but you can even flip to the next slide, and there's another set of examples too.
Before I move on there, I want to say that these are the kind of things that move sales guys. I tell you, you give me somebody within product marketing that says, hey, this is what you need to change or improve, or this and that, or whatever, and you know what, I may or may not take that and then make those adjustments. You bring me a comment right from my client that just cost me my next month's paycheck, I'm going to listen up quickly because I know that that's the individual that I need to be pleasing. And so if you really want to move a sales team to actually change and improve, use these kind of comments. Not only find your data, because I think as you look at sales, even marketing or whatever, marketing is probably going to be a little bit more focused around the data side of things, but you use the both together, and even some of the stuff that we've got now is the ability to have the recording, the actual verbal listening to those comments. That can even be that much more powerful to helping that organization move and change and improve from a process improvement perspective. Critically important. Let's move on down to the next slide there then.
You bet. And really it's just another emphasis on just how much good information your losses will share with you to tell you how to improve. It's quite the thing when they're able to help you get to the point where you know what the next steps are. I know where I'm inconsistent. I know what's important. I know what would help me win more effectively, and my market has told me how to make those changes. Really, to me, it's quite a simple formula to follow and very powerful.
That's great.
I'll turn it back to you.
Any questions, Chris, that we have that have come through?
We have a question, and the question is, what's the best practice? And it's a little bit off the side of this, but I think it's somebody who's having a hard time getting the loss information from their sales teams.
So what is the best practice in getting that?
What's the best practice in getting loss information from our sales teams?
I think it goes back to the little comment we had a little earlier on the CRM adoption. Getting the teams to actually put in the contact information for their losses and capturing that at the CRM level or SFA level, what I do there, that is crucially important, and making sure that that is set up as a process that every one of your losses has to be tracked. So every deal that you're tracking has to be in that SFA system. And then don't allow them to delete them. And then make sure and capture that information and get that contact information. And then have an executive that's within your organization's the chief sales officer or audit the CEO or whatever, making sure to let people know that it is crucially important that you do the win-loss interviewing, and that our livelihood and your livelihood as a sales team is really all around if they're going to actually give us the losses so that we can get that information. If you're having a struggle there, I would look to some of those areas. Find out if you have enough executive buy-in for the program. If you don't, definitely work on that, because once you get that executive buy-in and everybody knows this is something we're going to do and will do, and regardless how much you whine and moan about that I don't want this one interviewed, that it's going to have to go up to that executive to say, yeah, okay, I can see why you don't want that one interviewed, but that 95 to 100% of those accounts that you either win or lost will be interviewed, because the data is so critically important to the organization and to you as a sales executive.
There's another question here. Yeah, there's just another question that kind of ties into that, and I think the whole thing is, how do you help your client sales team learn from the interviews without feeling beat up? And quite honestly, I think that the problem is that most sales reps would be fearful of providing their losses in the first place, and I say fearful because they don't know what's going to happen next.
Yep.
But once they start to see, I think this speaks to the need to distribute information about the program very broadly, to make them a part of the program, and to distribute the findings very broadly also, so that people can see this is not a referendum on a salesperson, but it's an overall third-party diagnosis of how do we make ourselves, if a sale, like you said, if a sales rep believes that his commission will improve because he improves, then it's a no-brainer. It's just getting to that credible point.
I think one of the other key things that really helps to build that credibility with the sales team is the post-interview debriefs. This is one thing that I know, Chris, and you and I have seen numerous times, is you bring on that sales guy with the product individual, with the marketing individual that was responsible for that, even if it's you're bringing on some of the people that were helping build out the proposal or whatever in that post-interview debrief. Critically important. Take the time to walk through those. Don't just send out the interviews and hope that somebody's going to read them. Hope is never a strategy to improvement, at least.
Right.
Get out there and really sit down with the individuals and have our program consultant be on the call. Chris, talk a little bit about some of those post-interview debriefs that we had with one of that telecommunications hardware vendor.
Oh, you know what? It was just actually some of the most productive time I spent. Once we had the profile, and we would have an audience of 10 to 12, including executives, sales management, product management, and these were very large opportunities, so it justified their attention. But over one interview, they could find 45 minutes of information to be able to make improvements. And I'm not talking about off of 100 interviews. I'm talking about one interview. One interview. And the part that I thought was great was how often the sales rep was able to feel like, now you know it's not just me talking about this. Look what my clients and my prospects are saying. We need to make changes in the way we do these things, the way we support these things, and the way we communicate them. And overall, very constructive. Action items galore.
And I think that's really where the sales rep gets the chance to feel that this isn't a witch hunt. This is all about process improvement. He gets the chance to share. And you know what? It's painful sometimes. Definitely give that sales rep the chance to read it over so that he can prepare himself. Because I tell you, there's some deals that I've actually had the loss interview come back on it. Man, it felt like a Mack truck hit me in the face. But what it did do is help me pinpoint areas that I need to improve and change. Give them the chance to make that change, but also give them the chance to share what they experienced, what they went through, and then as a group, make those changes. And you'll start to see a sales team that wants to share their wins and their losses, especially their losses, because they're the ones that know that, hey, my paycheck relies on this data, and I want to have more of it. And you'll start to see, Chris, I've heard it from multiple different program consultants as well, as you start to see that the sales reps start begging, hey, can we do this one? Can we do this one?
Yeah, when are you going to take care of mine? When do I get some feedback on mine? And it's great.
Exactly.
Should we launch that poll question, Mike?
Yeah, let's launch it.
I think this is an interesting, and I wish we had some better way of capturing this data, or at least formulating the responses we have. But I'm interested in knowing how effective different companies feel about being able to make change with win-loss intelligence. So go ahead, and the voting is open. We'll just leave that up for a minute.
And from my perspective, this is the end-all and be-all of what we do. Is if you can make the process change, great. If you can't, that's where we need to help. We need to help as an organization to help you be able to pinpoint what we can do to make that happen. It's one of the main reasons we have the trigger questions. It's one of the main reasons we have quantitative before the qualitative. It's the main reason we have recordings, so that we can get to the real meat and potatoes of what's taking place and be able to peel back that onion to be able to say, here is the real issue that's taking place there, and not just stay on the surface.
We'll go ahead and close that down in just a couple of seconds. If everybody would like to just take a last second to vote, that would be great, please. I know there are a few of you out there that haven't, so take the opportunity. We'd love to hear from you here. All right, we'll close that down in 3, 2, 1, and we'll share those results out. I think that's encouraging that the number of companies are able to do good work with their intelligence. I think that's
awesome.
That's telling. I mean, that's to me the sign of mature organizations that make decisions properly. I haven't written the book on that. One day maybe I'll have some credibility behind that statement. Great.
But awesome.
And also, if there's anybody else in the audience that has questions as we move into our last segment, please go ahead and type those in your question box. We'd love to be able to capture those and answer them before the time is over.
So, anything else you wanted to cover there, Chris, before we head on to the next
No,
spot?
no, Mike. This will be great.
Okay, awesome. So this is kind of really where I wanted to head with this whole conversation, which is how do we turn our past losses into some of our future revenue and see the losses as a lead generation tool, not just a, well, that happened in the past and, I'm going to try to forget about it and move on. And that is where I really find that many of my clients are at. Their dashboards continue to get all this wonderful win-loss data, and it builds and it builds, and they're always so focused on the new stuff, the thing that just came on in, and forget about all the old stuff that actually continues to get better and better as time goes on. When you look at a loss, most industries that we work in are cyclical to some degree. In healthcare insurance, it's yearly, maybe 3-4 years. In software technology, it might be 4 or 5 years, but down the road, they're going to come on up for a evaluation again. And there's a ton of information in each one of those losses on what you can do from a tactical perspective to win that particular engagement again down the road. They are giving you the marching orders of what you need to do to improve that and make those changes. A couple of things that we've done from our organization is we sit down and we look at each and every one of those losses. And as they get to the point where they're 1 year, 2, 3 years old, they even become that much more valuable to us because we start to say, there should be an RFP coming out again, or there should be the opportunity to get back into that engagement. And I'm going to actually open up our dashboard here and show you some of the ways that you can pinpoint some of that stuff, but realize don't dismiss those losses because they're a loss, and especially because they're getting a little older. So I'm going to put this here for a second. I'm going to pull us over to our dashboard. And so what I'm getting to right now is we have our online tools. Oh, there it is. Okay. You seeing this, Chris?
Not yet, but I'm hoping it'll come up. There it is. I've got it now.
Okay, cool. So now what we're looking at is this is our the TruVoice dashboard, and I'm just showing you a client that's our demo data. But they've got 41 interviews in here, 18 of them being wins and 22 losses. And these losses are the key things that I want to kind of focus on as I kind of walk through this dashboard with you. You can see we have strong losses, weak losses, moderate losses. We even have to the point where there's some weak losses that are in here. And weak losses are the ones that I think really have some of the telling points. Another key point that I think that is crucial as you look at most of my clients' data is we have a few different key performance indicators through the interview questions that we've got. One of them being actually really the kind of net promoter score type question, which is deserves a strong recommendation from me to others. And this particular data set is showing that overall they have a plus 53, which means they have 58% of their loss or their wins and losses that are promoting them. That said, yeah, a 9 or a 10 on a 10-point scale would say that we would definitely recommend them to others. There's only 4.9% of this data set of these 41 interviews that would say they'd be, no, we wouldn't, or it would be a 6 or below that would say that be a detractor. For me, that looks like a real opportunity. You say, wow, if I could determine who the losses that we've had in the past that would be promoters for me, or even another question that we have as a key performance indicator, the future business score, which is we'll get serious consideration for future business opportunities with my company. Well, in my opinion, those two things, if they have both of these areas here, that's so much stronger than any lead that I could generate off of a lead generation process. Not only do I know that they'd be willing to recommend me, but there'd also be they're very well looking at a 9 or a 10 to be a future business with me. Let me find out where are those deals. So if I just look at our dashboard here, I can sit down and identify here's all the key competitors we've got. All I need to do is go to key performance indicators, click on those that are promoters, and now my dashboard just slid back to all those interviews that are actually promoters for me. If I click on the AND button, and I go to the outcomes, so now I just want to look at my losses, bingo. Now I know that I've got all of those that would recommend me. 100% of these would recommend me in the future to their companies or friends. Awesome opportunities. Now I might even just want to look at those deals where there's a weak loss, and we have competitive advantage in that engagement, wow, I want to be going after that. It's been since January 2012. Let me figure out, can I turn that one into a sale? One little story to tell you a little bit about this, kind of similar to this. We had one of our clients that's a large healthcare insurance provider down in the southern states. They're really the 800-pound gorilla in their segment. They did a win-loss program with us where they had 30 wins and 30 losses. They found out some fantastic information from the wins, but when they looked at the losses, they said, hey, what could we do to win some of these losses back? We know we should have never lost these deals because we are the organization that should have won them all the time. Let's figure out, of these losses, which are the most important. So they segmented them out, and this was even before our dashboard. I could do it so much faster for them now to get to that information. They found the top 10 of those deals where they had lost and said, let's go after these ones and let's use these different feedback all these information from these wins and these losses to say, hey, what can we do to win them back? They went back that next year, or the next time the RFP came on up, they won 3 of those 10 back just by doing that, by getting into there and really helping those sales team understand, here's our marching orders and what we need to do. That they're more than paid for the entire win-loss program just from those 3 engagements. Now, they found out tons more other information, but those are some of the ways that you can really use those losses as a gold mine and find out what's really hidden down in there and turn those into wins. Chris, any other comments that you had on that right now?
No, I mean, it's just so many of my clients I know, if we just go back and look at their data from 3 years ago, 4 years ago, some of them are going to RFP even just after 2 years to rebid the same services.
Yep.
And you know what? It's like walking in with the biggest head start. The incumbent, of course, may have his place at the table, but they've told you why you didn't make the cut last time and get the deal. They told you what it would have taken for you to do that. Well, let's put them to the test, because I'll bet you that there are ways to increase your market share significantly just in those specific one-by-one win-backs.
Yep. Very important. One of the other things, another story that we had recently, we had an engagement where we had lost the business 3.5, 4 years ago, and we got undersold by a few different of our other competitors. They were able to go on in there and kind of tell a little bit of the story about the quality of interviewing. We made some of those adjustments in our process and really started to make our quality of interviewing much better. But by using that loss interview, I was able to pinpoint, here's some of the key things that they're looking for. So when that RFP came out again, I made sure and adjust our RFP to fit exactly what their needs were from that last loss interview. Came on in, really looked through all the details of there, went on back. We won that business hands down. As we did the win-loss interview afterwards, we were pulling 10s and won that business, and we weren't the cheapest. We knew we were going to be the most expensive going in. They had a pretty good feel that was going to be the case as well, but we were able to differentiate ourselves so much better that we didn't have to be playing this, hey, let's talk about who's going to be the lowest price vendor, because the other vendors really didn't even have a chance because we were able to hit really all of those key points. 3 years before that, though, we lost it on those same key points because we weren't able to articulate it in the way that they needed to hear it. And by using that loss interview, really turned that into a gold mine, not just a nice chunk of rock that somebody sits back and says, well, I don't want to look at that thing again. That thing's sharp. So hopefully, and we're getting close to the end of our time here as we're wrapping up here, hopefully this is giving you some ideas. Leverage the data that you've got. Don't be afraid to say, hey, we've got 25, 30 different losses in there, or maybe even a couple hundred losses. Let's sit down and say, how many of these are old? Are we in those engagements still? Are they a possibility? And find out if they're even worth going after, because I'm sure you're going to find some of those engagements you look at and say, you know what, we should have never been in that deal. We need to make sure and cull this one out. But you have the information, the intelligence, the knowledge of this is the one that we don't want to go after because it has this and this point in it, where there's other ones in here that really could be a great way to pull back in. A couple $100,000, a couple $1 million of new revenue that you'd already lost in the past.
So I've got another question here, Mike, and from the audience, it's just operational, but we find getting loss interviews to be like pulling teeth. Either the relationship is sensitive, or the customer doesn't want to engage. Any best practices on getting lost customers to want to interview?
In fact, well, you probably could answer that one better than me because your team's out there getting them. But I find that we get a pretty dang good response rate for most of our losses.
Well, sure, and there are situations that would do that. First of all, when we talk about the relationship being sensitive, I hear that, but I don't understand exactly what that means. I hear that even from some of my clients occasionally, and what it usually means is that the sales rep uses that as a blanket excuse for not wanting to have loss interviews done.
Yeah.
But the in most cases the prospect has moved on. I'm not sure what further damage can be done by attempting to contact them. And really,
Well, in fact,
quite honestly,
yeah.
our data show over time that losses appreciate the opportunity to be heard. It is actually builds the relationship and leaves them feeling better about your company than if you hadn't tried to get any feedback at all.
Well, I've had multiple different comments from different program consultants over the time about how as you get into that loss interview, they go, wow, I'm going to need to think about them again because they're actually out there trying to improve and make process change and taking the time and money to have a third party do this for them.
Mm-hmm.
I probably need to look at them again because I washed them over too quickly, and really gives that sales team the opportunity to get back in there again just because of the win-loss interview or the time that we take to capture their feedback.
Second point I would make is that the person that has the best chance of getting them to participate is going to be the sales rep who had the relationship. So when we function ourselves, my assistant, we encourage our clients to send an email. Either hopefully the actual sales rep will send that email, and we have a template we use so they don't have to craft it themselves. But they will send the email either from the sales rep or from my project manager. Somebody within the company will say, this is what we do, we'd really like you to participate, and they copy my assistant on that. So my assistant's able to reply to that and be part of that thread. And we get so many responses where people just say, sure, I'll talk to you. This is fine.
Yep.
And then the third, oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
I was just going to say the third, arm wrestle now.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, and the third thing that sometimes you have to do is you might have to, if you can't get them to engage, if all else fails, you can offer an honorarium to the losses and pay them for their time, which is, we do it very rarely. There are a few of our industries where it is a necessity, but most of the time we get them to talk without that, and in those cases where we need to, we do.
I think it's, again, another point about the post-interview debrief. The more you can get your sales guy involved in the consumption of the data and the way that they can leverage it themselves, the better off they're going to be to the point of setting that whole appointment up. Now, I have some of our clients that they actually have their sales team set the entire appointment for us to do, and we get a massive, like 95% response rate, even on their losses.
That is so powerful. That is powerful.
It's
when
huge.
The sales rep buys in and does it. It's just powerful.
Yep. When you get the sales rep to actually talk about the win-loss process during the sales engagement, regardless if you win or lose this engagement, we're going to have a process called win-loss analysis, and we want to know what we can do to improve. And so they know that the skin's in the game, regardless if it's going to be a loss. They want to know what they can do to improve, right down to that sales guy, not just the organization, but that sales individual is looking for that feedback.
Yep.
And he's not going to go into there and try, hey, I want to resell you or want to do this. I'm going to use a third party to do this, so you're very comfortable sharing it. If that's the kind of things that are taking place, in my opinion, that's the best practice. Get those sales guys out there talking with that engagement in advance of the close.
Set the expectation.
Set it up so that when that notification goes on out, that they're, oh yeah, I remember you saying something about that. Let's do that. We even have some of our clients that write it in to the contract when they're signing it, saying by signing this, you're agreeing to an interview, so that we can improve it and make our products, our solutions, our services better for you and the entire marketplace as we go forward.
Boy, I hope that we've got a couple more questions, and we've got just a couple more minutes if people are able to stay around for that. But if you do have a last question before we wrap up, please go ahead and enter that. We'll be happy to share anything that, if we know how to do it, we'll share it with you. Mike, I think that again, that idea of just that last point you were making in the presentation about the cyclical nature of business. Today's losses are tomorrow's wins, but how much better prepared are you to go back in when you've got the loss information? When you've got people who are actually promoters,
yeah,
that they didn't select you, but they would recommend you to a friend, that's powerful.
It's huge, and we find that with our own engagements, we're closing about 50 to 60% of those losses over time, which means, guys, you should, I mean, even if your win rate's, 40, 50, even if it's 20%, look at all those losses that you have out there. Use the tools that we've got here to be able to pinpoint which ones of those losses should we be going back after. How can we get those to be that gold tomorrow, next year, next month? Whatever that is, get out there and use those to actually really turn not only the return on investment for your win-loss program, but for your organization. Turn those losses into wins. They should be. You had the opportunity to strut your stuff, and for whatever reason it didn't go quite right, but they've given you the feedback on what you need to do to strut it right the next time. And take that feedback and learn. And maybe it takes you 1, 2 times of getting a loss again to figure it out, but at least you're getting that feedback to understand what you can do to improve.
Yep. Another question that came through, Mike, and that is they don't, at this point, they don't feel like they're at a place where they can use a third party. If they were going to try to do win-loss internally, what would be the recommendation that would help them to be most successful?
Across the board for win-loss, or just from a loss perspective? I guess you don't know because you just got a question there.
Right.
But my suggestion is get executive buy-in first off. You've got to get those individuals, regardless if you're doing it internally or externally, you've got to get certain executives that are going to say, this is what we want to do. That way you can allocate the resources for it. I would also say something, if you're going to do this internally, find individuals that you can make this pretty much their full-time job.
That's key, yeah.
Yeah. It's so easy to say, hey, you're responsible for win-loss today. You go ahead and do a couple of these interviews. But typically, what we find from an internal perspective is you'll throw somebody on there that's in marketing, not a sales individual, and the actual time it takes to get these people to get on the phone with you, you have to be pretty tenacious. And what we find is those individuals aren't necessarily salespeople. That's why they're in marketing, because they didn't do the sales thing, and they don't really want to do the sales things. But now they're responsible to get these interviews set up with the individuals that the sales guy had a rough time getting into set up. But take the time, make sure that that's their key job. Go on out there, give them incentives to get those interviews done. Get those interviews coming back. Record a call. Do both wins and losses, and get it transcribed. Bring that information back to the executives and get in that feedback, and then start leveraging that data. So use somebody, but make sure that you get it to the point where it's very important for the executives and the organization, because it's not necessarily a cheap process, even internally, because you have to get the right people on board and understand how to do it right. And we'd be more than happy to chat with you, even from a consulting perspective, on how to do this internally if you want to. We have a few of the other clients that I know that I'm working with right now that do it internally and are looking to us to kind of help build out some of the processes that they can use. And the TruVoice software and technology that we've got here in the future will be something that we'll be able to license right directly to organizations that want to do it on their own as well, without even using us to do the interviewing.
Great point, yep. We've got an empty question queue, and I think we've spent as much time as we've gone a little over. In fact, Mike, it's been a great session, though, and we appreciate everybody having attended.
So have a fantastic day. Thanks so much for coming, and hopefully leverage this one. If you need the slides or whatever, let us know. But we'd be more than happy to give you the recording so you can push it around, or even the slides. Have a fantastic day, and good luck with finding that gold in your losses.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.